Darius Calloway was 41 years old, and until that Saturday morning, he believed the life he'd spent 14 years building was still his. He was a master electrician, a man who had grown a one-person operation into a thriving contracting firm through nothing but discipline, early mornings, and work that never stopped. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't loud. He was the kind of man who built things and let them speak. That morning, he was washing his truck in the driveway when a cherry-red Ferrari rolled slowly down his street and stopped directly in front of him. The man who stepped out walked over with the unhurried confidence of someone who believed he was completely untouchable. He leaned in close, nodded toward the car, and laughed. "I bought this with your money. Figured you wouldn't mind." $74,000, 14 months, his own business account, and his wife's signature on every transfer. Darius watched the Ferrari pull away. Then he picked up his wash rag and finished the truck. He didn't make a single call. He didn't say a single word. But something had just been set in motion that Brent Holloway would never see coming. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The sky over Meridian Middle School was still black when Darius Calloway arrived. 6:15 a.m. The parking lot was empty except for 2 supply trucks and a flatbed with conduit stacked 6 feet high. The air smelled like damp concrete and cut grass. A portable work light hummed near the east entrance, throwing a pale yellow circle across the asphalt. Darius sat in his truck for 30 seconds before he got out. He always did that. Just 30 seconds of stillness before the day started. His crew had learned not to knock on the window. He climbed out with his coffee in one hand and the rolled schematics tucked under his arm. His boots were steel-toed and worn at the heel. His jacket had Calloway and Associates embroidered over the left chest in simple white thread. No logo, no slogan, just the name. Marcus, his foreman, met him at the entrance. Marcus was a big man with a graying beard and hands that looked like they'd been carved from wood. He had worked with Darius for 9 years. He talked fast in the mornings. "Conduit delivery showed up at 5:30, Marcus said. "Half the junction boxes are still on back order. Supplier says Friday at the latest." He paused. "I told him Thursday." "Tell him Wednesday," Darius said. "We're pulling wire in room 114 by end of next week." Marcus nodded and made a note on his clipboard. Inside, the school smelled like old carpet and sawdust. The renovation had gutted 3 wings of the building down to the studs. Darius walked the east corridor slowly, coffee in hand, eyes moving across the ceiling where the new conduit runs would go. He had walked this hallway maybe 40 times since they broke ground. He still walked it like it was the first time. They set up the folding table near the gymnasium entrance. Darius unrolled the schematics and smoothed them flat with his forearm. He found the error in 4 minutes. Panel schedule on page 7. Whoever had drafted the revised plans had bumped a 20-amp circuit to a 15-amp breaker on the kitchen sub-panel. It was a small thing, the kind of thing that could pass through 3 sets of eyes without anyone blinking. It would also fail inspection and cost them 2 weeks. "Get me a red pen," Darius said. Marcus handed him one without a word. Darius circled the error, wrote the correction in clean block letters, and made a note in the margin with the relevant code reference NEC 210-21B1. Then he set the pen down and took a sip of his coffee. "Call the engineer's office when they open," he said. "We need a revised sheet by tomorrow afternoon. You want me to tell them how it happened?" "No. Just tell them what needs to change." Marcus almost smiled. Almost. He went to make the call. Darius stood alone over the schematics for a moment. 14 years. That was how long it had taken to get here. To a contract this size, with a crew this solid, in a building this visible, a public school. The kind of job that put your name on something permanent. He had submitted the bid himself, had revised it twice. had driven to the county office to hand-deliver the paperwork because he didn't trust the mail. He looked at the corrected page and rolled the schematics back up. Time to work. He left the site at noon. The crew had hit their marks for the day. The engineer's office had already called back. They'd have the revised sheet by morning. Small victories, stacked one on top of the other. That was how anything real ever got built. He called Yvette from the truck. 4 rings. Voicemail. Her voice on the recording was warm and a little rehearsed. The voice she used when she wanted to sound like herself, but better. "You've reached Yvette. Leave me something good." Darius hung up without leaving a message. He merged onto the highway and turned the radio on low. The house was quiet when he got home. Not peaceful quiet. The other kind. He set his keys on the hook by the door and stood in the front hallway for a moment. The afternoon light came through the blinds in long stripes across the hardwood floor. Everything was clean. Everything was in its place. Yvette kept a neat house. That was something that had always been true about her. On the kitchen counter, held to the cabinet by a small magnet shaped like the state of Georgia, was a yellow post-it note. Conference in Atlanta. Back Sunday. Leftovers in the fridge. Darius looked at the note for a moment. It was Thursday. He didn't remember her mentioning a conference. He folded the note in half and left it on the counter. Then he opened the refrigerator and found the container she'd left. Pasta, looked like, with the plastic wrap stretched tight across the top. He put it in the microwave and ate standing at the counter, looking out the window at the backyard. After he ate, he washed the dish and dried it by hand and put it away. Then he sat down at the kitchen table with his laptop. Thursday evenings were when he reviewed the business accounts. It was a habit he had built years ago, back when the margins were thin enough that every dollar had to be accounted for by the man who earned it. The business had grown since then. The margins were better. But the habit had stayed, because Darius believed that the moment you stopped paying attention was the moment something slipped. He opened the account portal and let it load. He scrolled through the month's activity the way he always did. Steady, line by line, the way you read a schematic. Payroll, materials, fuel reimbursements, utility on the commercial unit, insurance premium. All of it familiar, all of it expected. Then he stopped. 3 transfers, 6 weeks apart, spaced just enough that no single one would shout. $4,200. External transfer. Authorized Y. Callaway, $6,800. External transfer. Authorized Y. Callaway, $11,500. External transfer. Authorized Y. Callaway. The destination account number was one he did not recognize. It was not a vendor he knew. It was not a line item he had approved. It bore no name, just a routing number and a string of digits. $2,500. Gone. Darius sat at the table and did not move. He read the 3 lines again. Then a third time. Not because he was confused. He understood exactly what he was looking at. He read them again because he was a man who believed in making certain before he acted on anything. He picked up his phone and opened the camera. He photographed the screen. Each transfer, the account number, the dates, the dollar amounts. He took 4 photos from different angles until the numbers were sharp and clear. Then he put his phone face down on the table. He closed the laptop. He sat in the quiet kitchen for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's dog barked twice and went silent. He did not call Yvette. He did not call Jerome. He did not call anyone. He turned off the kitchen light and went upstairs. He lay in the dark with his hands folded on his chest, staring up at the ceiling. The ceiling fan turned slowly above him. The room was cool. The bed was made on Yvette's side. Pillows undisturbed, everything smooth and in order. Darius did not chase sleep. He let his eyes stay open and his mind stay still, the way he'd learned to do on long jobs when the work was serious and the margin for error was small. He thought in straight lines. He had built everything in this house. The equity in the walls, the name on the business, the account those transfers had come from. He had wired job sites in the rain and submitted bids on his lunch break and reinvested profit when he could have spent it, because he was building toward something. He had believed they both were. He stared at the ceiling. Now he needed to know exactly what had been taken. Paulette Calloway was still in her robe when Darius knocked. She opened the door, coffee mug in hand, and looked at her son the way mothers look when they already know something is wrong, but are waiting to be told what. She had that gift. She'd always had it. "You ate?" she asked. "No." She stepped aside and let him in. Her kitchen smelled like butter and coffee and the lavender spray she used on the dish towels. Darius sat at the small table by the window, the same chair he had sat in as a boy, doing homework while she cooked. Some things didn't change. He was grateful for that right now. She set a plate in front of him without asking. Eggs, toast, a few strips of bacon. She poured him a cup of coffee and sat down across from him with her own. For a while, neither of them said anything. That was fine. Paulette had never required noise to feel comfortable with her son. Darius cut into his eggs. "How has Yvette seemed to you lately?" he asked. He kept his voice easy, casual, like he was making conversation. Paulette wrapped both hands around her mug. Her eyes moved to the window, then back to him. "Why are you asking me that?" "Just asking." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she set her mug down. "Baby," she said. "I didn't want to say anything. Didn't feel like my place." She paused. "But I saw her car at the Marriott on Briar 2 Saturdays ago, parked right there in the lot. I recognized the plates." She said it carefully, like she was setting something fragile on a table. "She told you she was at her sister's that weekend, didn't she?" It wasn't really a question. Darius chewed, swallowed, took a sip of coffee. "She did," he said. Paulette watched him. He could feel it. The careful way she was measuring his face, looking for the crack. There wasn't one to find. "You're not going to tell me what this is about," she said. "Not yet." She nodded slowly. She picked her mug back up. "You want more toast?" "Please," he said. He stayed an hour. He let his mother talk about her neighbor's new fence and the church fundraiser coming up in March, and the fact that the grocery store on 5th had raised the price of orange juice again, and it was highway robbery. He listened to all of it. He laughed in the right places. He ate everything she put in front of him. When he hugged her at the door, she held on a half-second longer than usual. He didn't say anything about that either. In the car, he called Jerome. "I need you to look at something," Darius said. A beat. Jerome knew him well enough not to ask a bunch of questions on the front end. "When?" "Monday. Your office. I'll be there," Jerome said. "You okay?" "I will be." He hung up and drove to the business office. The commercial unit on the east side was quiet on Friday mornings. The crew was at the school site. The front office was empty. Darius unlocked the door, turned on the fluorescent lights, and sat down at the filing cabinet behind the desk. He pulled 14 months of statements. He had expected it to be bad. It was worse. The 3 transfers he'd found last night were just the ones that had been recent enough to catch his eye. Going back 14 months, the picture was different, uglier, and in a strange way, more impressive. The way a termite infestation is impressive once you open the wall and see the full scale of it. Small amounts, irregular spacing, $1,800 here, $3,400 there. A few weeks of nothing, then $6,200, then silence again. Never a pattern clean enough to be obvious, never large enough to look like a single act of desperation. Methodical. He went through every page with a yellow legal pad beside him, writing each transfer down in a column. Date, amount, authorization. When he reached the bottom of the last statement, he added the column. He looked at the number for a while. $74,000. 14 months. The whole time he was bidding the school contract. The whole time he was building. He photographed every page of every statement. Then he connected a small encrypted drive he kept in his desk drawer, personal, no connection to the business network, and transferred every image to it. He checked them twice to make sure they were readable and complete. Then he put the statements back exactly where they had been. Every page, every folder, every drawer. He changed nothing. He moved nothing. He left the office, locked it behind him, and drove home to wait. Yvette came through the door at 6:30, rolling a carry-on behind her. Slightly tanned, smiling. She dropped the bag by the stairs and held out a small paper gift bag. The kind hotel gift shops sold near the checkout. Marriott printed on the side in clean sans serif font. "Atlanta got me," she said, laughing. "Brought you something." He looked in the bag. A pack of mixed nuts and a coffee mug with the Atlanta skyline on it. "Thank you," he said. She kissed his cheek. He smiled. She talked about the conference over dinner, the panels she'd attended, the woman from Nashville who had sat next to her at lunch, the restaurant she'd gone to on the last night that had the best shrimp and grits she'd ever tasted. She talked easily and with detail, and none of the details snagged on anything, and she looked relaxed in the way that people look relaxed when they believe they are perfectly safe. Darius listened to every word. Afterward, he washed the dinner dishes while Yvette moved to the couch and turned on the television. The water ran warm over his hands. He worked through each dish in order. Plates first, then glasses, then the pan from dinner, rinsing and stacking with the same steady patience he brought to everything. He was not angry yet. Anger was for men who had no plan. The morning was cool and gray, the kind of Saturday that smelled like rain that hadn't arrived yet. Darius had the hose running and a bucket of soapy water sitting on the driveway beside his truck. He worked from the roof down. That was how you did it right. Top to bottom. Let gravity help you. He was working the passenger side when he heard it. A low growl, deep and foreign-sounding, the kind of engine that didn't belong in this neighborhood. He didn't look up right away. He kept moving the sponge in long, even strokes across the door panel. The sound slowed. Then it stopped. He looked up. A cherry-red Ferrari sat across the street, idling in front of the Hendersons' house. The morning light caught the paint and made it look almost wet. It was the kind of car designed to be looked at. Built for it, really. And it was doing exactly what it was built to do. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out in cream linen pants and a white shirt open at the collar, aviator sunglasses catching the gray sky. He stood beside the car for a moment, the way people stand when they want to be seen standing somewhere. Then he looked across the street. Darius looked back. He knew the face. He had not known the name when he first saw it. 3 days ago, scrolling through the deleted photos folder on the family iPad. The one Yvette used for recipes and calendars, and apparently a few other things she had not considered carefully enough. The photo had been taken at a restaurant downtown. A nice one. White tablecloths, candles, the kind of place you made a reservation for. Yvette was laughing at something off-camera. The man beside her had his hand on the back of her chair. Darius had never taken her to that restaurant. He had noted the face, filed it, moved on. Now the face was crossing the street toward him. Darius set the sponge on the hood and straightened up. The man came across without hesitation, without invitation, with the particular ease of someone who had never once been told he wasn't welcome somewhere. He stopped a few feet away and pushed his sunglasses up into his hair. "Hey," he said, extending a hand. "Brent Holloway. I've been looking at some properties in the area." He smiled, even white teeth. A firm handshake, the practiced kind. "You live here long?" "A while," Darius said. "Nice block." Brent looked up and down the street, nodding slowly, like a man appraising something. "Good bones." He glanced back at the Ferrari, then at Darius. "You see the car?" Darius looked at it. "I see it," he said. Brent smiled again, But it was a different smile this time. Smaller, sharper. He took a half step closer and lowered his voice just enough to make it feel like something private. "I bought this with your money." He said it slow, like he was enjoying the weight of each word. "Figured you wouldn't mind." Then he laughed. It was a short, hard sound. Not warm, not nervous. The laugh of a man who believed the joke was entirely his. He turned around, walked back across the street, folded himself into the Ferrari, and pulled away from the curb. Darius watched the car until it turned the corner, and the sound of the engine faded to nothing. Then he picked up the sponge and went back to work. He finished the truck, rinsed it, dried it with the chamois he kept folded in the garage. He coiled the hose back onto its hook, emptied the bucket, and put everything away in its place. That evening, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open and a name typed into the county clerk's public records portal. Brent A. Holloway. It didn't take long. It never did, if you knew where to look. And Darius had wired an entire office building for a man who worked in that department 3 years back. A favor owed. A phone call made. What came back was plain and simple. One property. A commercial unit in a strip mall on the west side. An active lien against it, filed 8 months ago. A judgment from a creditor Darius didn't recognize. The kind of paperwork that collected when a man was spending faster than anything was coming in. Darius opened a second tab, typed the Ferrari's plate number into the vehicle registration lookup. It came back registered to a leasing company out of Nashville. He sat with that for a moment. Brent Holloway had no money. He had a leased Ferrari and a lien and one struggling property. And he had spent $74,000 of someone else's savings turning himself into a man who looked like he did. Every dollar taken had been a costume. Darius closed the laptop. He picked up his phone and called Jerome. "Move the meeting to Monday," he said. "We're going to need more time." He hung up and set the phone face down on the table. The house was quiet around him. Yvette was out. She hadn't said where. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a dog barked twice and went still. Darius sat with his hands flat on the table and did not move. Jerome Watts kept his office on the second floor of a narrow brick building on Clement Avenue, sandwiched between a tax prep service and a notary public. There was no receptionist, just a frosted glass door with his name stenciled on it in black letters, a waiting area with 2 chairs and a ficus that had seen better days, and the man himself already at his desk when Darius arrived at 7:45 Monday morning. Jerome looked up when Darius pushed through the door. He looked at the folder under Darius's arm. He looked at the iPad. He didn't say, "Good morning." He got up and closed the blinds. They sat across from each other at the desk, the way they had sat across from each other for 30 years. No ceremony, no small talk. Jerome put on his glasses and opened the folder. He started at the beginning. He went through every page slowly, the way a man reads when he intends to remember what he's reading. Darius sat still and let him work. Jerome pulled up a legal pad and started writing things down. Account numbers, dates, amounts. He cross-referenced the transfer destinations against a routing number lookup on his computer. He leaned back in his chair and took his glasses off. "This account," he said, tapping the page with one finger. "The destination account. It's a joint checking account. Opened 14 months ago at First Regional." He paused. "You're not on it." "No," Darius said. "Yvette Calloway and Brent A. Holloway." "Yes." Jerome set his glasses on the desk. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I need to see your LLC operating agreement." Darius pulled it from the back of the folder. Jerome read it carefully, turning pages slowly, marking 2 places with a yellow sticky tab. When he finished, he folded his hands on top of it and looked at Darius straight. "She had signatory access to the business account. Both of you did, as co-owners. But this operating agreement spells out her fiduciary duty to the LLC. She is legally obligated to act in the business's interest. These transfers," he tapped the folder, were not business expenses. They went into a personal account she shares with another man. That is a clear breach of fiduciary duty. He let that land. On the civil side, you have a strong claim for conversion of business assets, potentially unjust enrichment. Depending on how her attorney wants to play the divorce, this documentation limits her position significantly. He paused again. But there's more than a civil issue here, Darius. This amount, sustained over 14 months, with consistent attempts to obscure the pattern, a prosecutor would look at this. Darius nodded once. I want a formal report, he said. Everything documented, court ready. Jerome picked up his pen. 3 weeks minimum. I'll need access to the full 14 months of statements, the operating agreement, and anything else tied to the business accounts. He looked at the iPad. And I'll need copies of those photos for the file. You'll have everything by end of day. Jerome wrote something on the legal pad, then set the pen down. For a moment, the professionalism slipped. Just a fraction. Just enough to see what was underneath it. 14 months, Darius. I know. Jerome nodded and picked up his pen again. Darius made 2 calls before he left the parking garage. The first was to Patricia Okafor. She was known in this city the way certain tools were known. Not flashy, but exactly right for a specific job. She had a reputation for protecting business owners when marriages went bad, and spouses decided that 15 years of equity was a reasonable thing to help themselves too. Her assistant put Darius through in under 2 minutes. He had an appointment for Wednesday. The second call was to the bonding and insurance company that underwrote Callaway and Associates. He had been a client for 9 years. His account manager knew his voice. He explained what he needed, calmly, matter-of-factly, the way he talked about electrical load calculations, and the account manager walked him through the restructuring process. New single-member LLC. All instruments, bonds, and signatory positions transferred. Yvette's name removed from every document the company held. How long? Darius asked. If you get me the paperwork by Wednesday, we can have it processed by end of the week. I'll have it to you tomorrow, Darius said. He drove to the job site, walked the school renovation for 2 hours, caught a wiring issue in the East Corridor that would have cost them 3 days later in the build, and fixed it. Dinner that evening was baked chicken, rice, and the green beans Yvette made with the garlic and lemon. She had cooked. He had complimented it. She poured the wine. She was talking about the neighbors, the Pattersons, 2 doors down. Dave Patterson had finally redone the back patio, the one that had been cracked and pulling away from the foundation for 2 years. He did the whole thing in flagstone, Yvette said. I saw it when Sandra had me over for coffee this afternoon. It's beautiful, actually. He should have done it years ago. Darius refilled her water glass. Sounds nice, he said. Yvette smiled and kept talking. Every word she said was going somewhere she couldn't follow. The call came Saturday morning, just after 9. Paulette's voice was steady. But Darius had known that voice his entire life. He heard the careful thing underneath it. Come by when you get a chance, baby. I've got something for you. Not come eat. Not just checking on you. Something for you. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. Paulette's house smelled like coffee and the cedar of the closet near the front door, the same way it had always smelled. She met him in the kitchen, already sitting at the table with her mug. There was a folded piece of paper in front of her. She didn't touch it when he walked in. She just looked at him the way she always looked at him. Steady, reading him, making sure he was ready. Sit down first, she said. He sat. She pushed the paper across to him. He unfolded it. It was a printed screenshot. Low resolution, the way things looked when a phone camera photographed a computer screen. A Facebook event page. The 4th Annual Briar City Community Leadership Gala. The date in the upper corner was 8 months ago. The photo showed a crowd shot from the event itself. Round tables, centerpieces, people dressed up and smiling. Below the photo, an automatic tag from the event organizer's page had listed attendees. Yvette Calloway was listed as a +1. Brent Holloway's +1. Darius read it twice. He set it flat on the table. "My neighbor's grandson pulled that for me," Paulette said. "The page was public." "He found it in about 10 minutes. She wrapped both hands around her mug. "I've been holding on to it for 3 weeks. I didn't know what you knew or didn't know, but I wasn't going to keep sitting on it." He looked at the names again. He knew the gala. He knew the organization that hosted it. He knew at least 6 people who would have been in that room, people from their church, people from the neighborhood association, people who had shaken his hand at community events and asked how business was going. 8 months ago, he had been working 70-hour weeks. He had been chasing the school renovation contract, meetings, bid revisions, site assessments, late nights at the office recalculating load specs to sharpen the number. He had eaten vending machine sandwiches in his truck. He had come home tired. He had kissed Yvette on the cheek and fallen asleep by 10 o'clock. The money he was working to earn was funding the evening he was now looking at, and the people in that room had said nothing. Not a phone call, not a word at church, not a quiet pull-aside from anyone who claimed to respect him. He sat with that for a moment. Then he folded the paper carefully and put it in his jacket pocket. "Thank you, Mama," he said. Paulette nodded. She didn't say, "I'm sorry," and he was glad she didn't. She just reached across and put her hand on top of his for a moment. One firm press. And then pulled it back. He stayed for 30 minutes. He drank a cup of coffee. He listened to her talk about her garden and the new pastor's Sunday sermon, and he answered when she asked him questions, and when he left, he kissed her on the forehead at the door. He made it 6 blocks before he pulled into the lot of a Gulf station on Mercer Street. He put the truck in park. He sat there. The engine ticked as it cooled. A teenager on a bicycle rolled through the lot and disappeared behind the building. Darius pressed his fingers against his mouth and breathed slowly through his nose. 70 hours a week. His name on that bid. His calculations. His crew. His reputation on the line every single day of that month. And she had been at a gala, in a dress he hadn't seen, on the arm of a man spending his money, in a room full of people who knew his face. He sat with it for 2 minutes. Maybe a little more. Then he wiped his face with the back of his hand. He pulled back onto Mercer Street and drove. The school renovation site looked different on Sunday mornings, quieter, just the skeleton of the building holding the early light. Darius had driven out there without quite deciding to. He walked the east corridor with a flashlight, checking the conduit runs his crew had roughed in the day before. Clean. Correct. His. He was back on site properly Monday at 6, and he worked through the morning with the kind of focus that made his crew move faster just by proximity. No wasted motion, no noise, just the work, done right. The contract officer, Hendricks, found him at the panel room just after noon. "Phase 1's running ahead of schedule," Hendricks said. "If the rest of the build holds this pace, the follow-on project is yours." Darius looked up from the schematic. "It'll hold," he said. Hendricks nodded and walked away, satisfied. That night, Darius sat at his desk. He opened the encrypted drive. He found the folder, the one that had been growing quietly, page by page, for weeks now. He added the gala screenshot. He noted the date in the file name. He closed the drive. The file was growing. Good. The warmth came on a Tuesday. Darius noticed it the way he noticed everything, quietly, without reacting. He came in from the site just after 6, boots dusty, shirt damp at the collar. Yvette was in the kitchen, not just present in the kitchen the way she'd been lately. Distracted, phone-facing, moving around him like he was furniture. But there, standing at the stove, music low, something that smelled like garlic and lemon already going in the pan. She turned when she heard him come in. "Hey, you," she smiled. "Go wash up. It's almost ready." He looked at the stove. He looked at her. "Smells good," he said, and went down the hall. At dinner, she asked about the school job. Not the polite, half-listening version. She asked a follow-up question. Then another. She refilled his water without being asked. When they were clearing the dishes, she leaned against the counter and said, almost casually, "I've been thinking we should take a trip. Something before fall gets here. What about Cancun?" Darius dried a glass. "Cancun," he said. "We haven't been anywhere in 2 years." She tilted her head. "We used to talk about it." "We did," he said. "So let's actually do it." She touched his arm lightly. "I'll look at some resorts if you look at flights. Sound good?" "I'll look into it," he said. She smiled again, warm, easy, and went to fold laundry. He never looked at a single flight. He was not certain what had triggered the shift in her, but he had a strong feeling it was the letter. 2 weeks prior, a piece of correspondence from the bonding company had arrived, addressed only to him. His name, the business P.O. Box forwarded to the house. No mention of Yvette. She would have seen it on the kitchen counter before he got home. She wouldn't have opened it, but she would have noticed. Or it could have been the phone call she may have heard 3 days later. Him on the back porch with Patricia, speaking low, running through a timeline. He hadn't checked whether the sliding door was fully closed. Either way, something had pricked her instincts, and her response was warmth. Cancun. Touch on the arm. Darius understood exactly what it was. A woman who sensed the ground shifting and reached for steadiness the only way she knew how. By performing the marriage she'd been neglecting for 14 months. He let her perform it. He was pleasant at dinner. He agreed to look at flights. He said that sounds nice when she showed him a picture of a beachfront resort on her phone one evening, and he meant none of it, and his face showed none of that. What Darius didn't know, not yet, not fully, was that Yvette was reaching in 2 directions at once. She had begun pushing Brent. Not loudly, but with the focused pressure of a woman who believed she had sacrificed something and needed to see a return on it. She wanted clarity. A plan. Some version of a future that made the last 14 months feel like a decision rather than a mistake. Brent had become evasive. His texts came slower. His answers got shorter. When she pressed for a conversation about what came next, he found reasons to be busy. A deal he was working, a meeting that ran long, a contact he had to see. She was beginning to feel the shape of something she did not want to name. The Ferrari confrontation had never been about her. She would come to understand that eventually. It had been about Brent needing a moment of dominance, needing to stand in front of a man he saw as a rival and make him feel small. Darius had been an audience, and Yvette had been the prop that made the performance possible. Now that the curtain had dropped, Brent had less use for either of them. Darius didn't know the details, but he knew the kind of man Brent Holloway was, and he had already drawn his conclusions. Jerome's email came on Thursday evening at 8:47 p.m. Darius was at his desk. He opened it. The subject line read, "Forensic report. Supplemental finding. Urgent." He read it once. Then he read it again, slower. Jerome had been tracing the larger transfers, the ones that individually would have drawn attention if anyone had been looking. 4 of them had not been recorded as transfers at all. They had been entered into the business records as vendor payments, payments to a contractor that, when Jerome ran the number, did not exist. The invoices attached to those payments had been altered, dates adjusted, amounts modified, a vendor name fabricated. The documents had been processed under Yvette's administrative access and signed with her electronic signature. Jerome's note at the bottom was brief. "This is no longer a civil matter only. I'm referring you to Marcus Webb, white-collar attorney, sharp, discreet. Call him before the end of the week." Darius sat back in his chair. She hadn't just taken the money. She had forged his company's records to do it. She had manufactured paperwork, created a false vendor, and buried the withdrawals inside his business ledger like they were legitimate expenses. She had used the infrastructure he spent 14 years building as the tool to steal from him. He picked up his phone. He forwarded Jerome's email to Patricia, then to Marcus Webb. He typed nothing above the forward. No subject line addition. No commentary. He just sent it. 3 weeks after the Monday meeting with Jerome, Darius sat across from Patricia in a leather chair that had seen 100 men in his exact position, though most of them, he suspected, had not arrived this prepared. Patricia's office was clean and spare. A credenza behind her held neatly labeled binders. On the wall hung her degrees, her bar certifications, a single framed quote he didn't read. She was a compact woman in her mid-50s with close-cropped natural hair and the particular stillness of someone who had long since stopped being surprised by anything a person could do to another person. The forensic report sat on the table between them, bound in a dark blue cover, notarized. Jerome's name on the front, with his CPA credentials listed in full. Patricia set her hand flat on top of it. "Everything is ready," she said. Darius nodded once. She walked him through it anyway. Not because he didn't know, but because she was thorough, and he respected that. The divorce petition was drafted and complete, ready to file the moment he said the word. The business restructuring had been finalized the previous Friday. Callaway and Associates no longer existed in the form that included Yvette's name. A new single-member LLC held every instrument: the bonding policies, the accounts, the equipment liens, the active contracts. It was entirely his. Her signatory access had been removed so quietly and so gradually that there had been no single moment to notice. "Her attorney is going to look for equity claims," Patricia said. 14 years of marriage, she'll argue she contributed to the business's growth. "Jerome's report addresses that," Darius said. "It does," she agreed. "The documented fraud against the LLC substantially neutralizes her standing. She stole from the thing she's trying to claim a share of. Any competent attorney advising her is going to tell her to settle and be grateful." She paused. "Marcus is on standby?" "He's ready." Patricia looked at him for a moment. Not with pity, with something closer to professional respect. "Then we file when you say." "Sunday morning," Darius said. 9 a.m. She made a note. He drove to see Yvette's brother that afternoon. Calvin Mercer was 51 years old and had worked 30 years as a high school vice principal. He lived in the same neighborhood he grew up in, drove the same make of truck he'd always driven, and attended the same church he'd been baptized in. He was the kind of man whose opinion carried weight in a family precisely because he gave it carefully and rarely. He and Darius had always gotten along. Not close, but solid. The kind of in-law relationship built on mutual respect and shared values. Calvin opened the door and read Darius's face in an instant. "Come in," he said. They sat at the kitchen table. Darius did not make a speech. He opened the folder he had brought and walked Calvin through it the same way he had walked himself through it weeks ago. Systematically, without editorializing. The statements, the joint account with Brent, the hotel receipts and retail charges, the gala photo, and last, the flagged pages from Jerome's report showing the forged invoices, the fabricated vendor, the altered records. Calvin sat very still. He was quiet for a long time after Darius finished. His jaw was tight. He looked at the documents the way a man looks at something he wishes he could unsee. "I didn't know," he said finally. "I know you didn't," Darius said. "Darius," Calvin shook his head slowly. "I am sorry. I'm not here for an apology," Darius said, and his voice was even. "I'm here because the filing happened Sunday, and I'm not going to let her get to you first with a version of this that isn't true." He closed the folder. "I'm not asking you to come against her. She's your sister. But I needed you to see it." Calvin nodded. He did not say he would protect her. He did not say he would call her. He said nothing more at all, and that was enough. Darius drove home in the early evening, the sky going orange above the rooftops. Yvette was on the couch with a glass of wine and a television show she liked. She looked up when he came in. "How was your day?" "Good," he said. "Productive." He set down his keys and sat beside her. Not too close, not too far. "Hey, what are you doing Sunday?" She muted the television. "Nothing." "Why?" "I thought we could just stay in. Cook something. Quiet day, just us." He glanced at her. "We don't do that enough anymore." Her face opened, genuinely. That was the thing about Yvette. Even now, even knowing what he knew, she could still perform warmth so naturally that he almost couldn't tell where the performance ended. "I'd love that," she said. "Good." He stood, touched her shoulder once as he passed. "I'll be up soon." In the kitchen, he filled a glass of water, set the coffee maker for 6:30, and turned off the overhead light. He went to bed. He lay in the same spot where, weeks ago, he had stared at the ceiling in the dark, the weight of $2,500 sitting on his chest like something physical. That man felt distant now, not gone, but far away, standing at the beginning of a road that Darius had since walked to its end. He was not staring at the ceiling tonight. He had built the case the same way he built everything else, carefully, completely, without a single unnecessary step. Tomorrow, it was done. The kitchen smelled like butter and warm bread. Yvette was at the stove in her robe, hair pinned up, humming something low under her breath. A pan of eggs was going. Sliced fruit sat in a bowl on the counter. The coffee was already done. She'd beaten the timer by 20 minutes. She was relaxed in the particular way of someone who believed the ground beneath her was solid. Darius came downstairs at 8:55. He was dressed, shoes on. He carried a folder against his side. Yvette glanced back at him over her shoulder and smiled. "Good timing. Eggs are almost done." He walked to the kitchen table, set the folder down in the center of it, pulled out a chair. Did not sit. "Sit down, Yvette," he said. "We're going to talk." Something in his voice made her turn all the way around. She looked at him, then at the folder, then back at him. She turned off the burner. She sat across from him with her hands wrapped around her coffee mug, and Darius opened the folder and began. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He walked her through it the same way he walked a new client through a job estimate, page by page, methodical, letting the numbers speak for themselves. The first transfers, the account number she'd sent them to, the 14 months of statements laid out in sequence, each one flagged with a yellow tab. Jerome's summary sheet showing the total, $74,240. Then the joint checking account, her name, and Brent Holloway's, opened at a regional bank 8 months ago. The printout showing deposits and withdrawals, hotel names he recognized, restaurants he had never been to, a line item from a luxury retailer, another from a car dealership, the first lease payment on a cherry red Ferrari. He slid the gala screenshot across the table without comment. She looked at it, said nothing. Then the last section. Jerome's flagged pages showing 4 transfers disguised as vendor payments, fabricated invoice numbers, a vendor name that did not exist, records altered in the system she had access to, using a format close enough to real that no routine review would catch it. Darius closed the folder and folded his hands on top of it. Yvette set down her mug. Her jaw was tight. When she finally spoke, her voice had the careful quality of someone choosing each word like a step across wet ground. "I can explain." "You can," he said. "Go ahead." She started with denial. The account was for a project. There was a misunderstanding about the vendor codes. She had intended to reconcile everything. Her voice was steady at first, professional almost. Then it shifted. "You don't know what it's been like," she said. "You're always gone, always working. I've been alone in this house for years, Darius. Years. And you never once asked me what I needed." She leaned forward. Her eyes were wet. and he couldn't tell anymore whether that was real or another register she'd reached for. "I was drowning," she said, "and you were so focused on the business, on the contracts, on your reputation. I was invisible. You made me invisible." He let her finish. He waited a full breath after she stopped. "Are you done?" he said. She blinked. "The divorce petition was filed at 9 o'clock this morning," he said. "Patricia's office handled it. You'll be served this week." He moved to the next document in the folder, a single sheet he had set aside. "Callaway and Associates no longer exists in any form that includes your name. Every account, bond, contract, and instrument transferred to a new LLC last Friday. Your signatory access was removed 3 weeks ago." Her mouth opened slightly. "Jerome's forensic report has been provided to my legal team and is available for law enforcement review if the civil process requires it." He paused. "The joint account you hold with Brent Holloway has already been flagged as part of the inquiry. Darius—" He slid one more sheet across the table. She looked down at it. A printed summary. Brent Holloway's financial profile. The lien filed against him 8 months ago. The single property listed under his business. The lease agreement on the Ferrari. Not a purchase. A business with outstanding debts and no significant revenue. Darius watched her read it. "He's been underwater for over a year," Darius said. "The car was a lease. The business is collapsing. He wasn't your future, Yvette." He kept his voice even. "He was a mirror, and you paid for it with my money." The room was very quiet. Yvette sat still. The fruit was in the bowl. The eggs were cold in the pan. The mug she'd been holding sat at the edge of the table like it had been forgotten. Darius picked up his keys from the counter. He did not look back at her on his way out. The driveway was cool and pale under the morning sky. He backed out slowly, the way he always did, and turned onto the street. He drove across town without the radio on. Paulette's front door opened before he reached the porch steps. She was already there, one hand on the frame, reading him the way only she could. "It's done," he said. She stepped aside to let him in. The consequences didn't arrive with noise. They arrived the way a properly wired system shuts down. Relay by relay, in the exact sequence it was designed to follow. Yvette's attorney called Patricia's office 8 days after the petition was served. Patricia relayed the summary to Darius in a single-paragraph email. Yvette's counsel had reviewed the forensic report and strongly advised against litigation. The forged invoices were the problem. Not just the transfers, not just the fiduciary breach, but the altered vendor records. Those 4 documents transformed a marital dispute into something a judge would look at very differently. Fighting the divorce settlement aggressively meant putting those documents in front of a courtroom. Yvette's attorney had apparently made that point clearly. She signed. The settlement gave her a fraction of what she would have received if she had simply asked for a divorce, like a person with nothing to hide. No claim on the business, no claim on the restructured LLC. The house stayed with Darius. 14 years of equity. Equity that Darius had built methodically, contract by contract, before sunrise and after dark, remained his. Patricia called to deliver the final terms herself. She was professional about it, but Darius could hear the quiet satisfaction underneath. "She didn't have a position to negotiate from," Patricia said. "I know," Darius said. "You did good work getting ahead of it." He thanked her and ended the call. The joint account took a little longer. The civil inquiry froze it within 2 weeks of the flag Jerome had placed. That was expected. What came after was not something Darius had engineered. It was simply what happened when light got into a space that had been kept deliberately dark. The investigative process that followed the account freeze began surfacing other irregularities in Brent Holloway's finances. A property deal with a private investor that didn't add up. A contract deposit that had moved to the wrong account. Small things, individually. Together, they told a story. Brent's one active property deal collapsed when the buyer's attorney ran a title search and discovered the lien. The deal died in 3 business days. The Ferrari lease was surrendered the following month. Darius didn't learn this directly. He heard it from the same contact at the county clerk's office who had first pulled Brent's records. The repo was quiet, but this was a mid-sized city. Quiet didn't mean invisible. Brent Holloway had walked onto Darius's street in linen and aviators and told him he had bought a car with his money. Now, the car was gone. The business was gone. And the city's real estate circles, small, interconnected, long-memoried, had gone cold on him in the particular way that professional communities go cold when someone becomes a liability. He wasn't in prison, but he was finished here. Yvette went to stay with a cousin, 2 counties over. Her older brother did not offer his house. He had sat across from Darius 3 weeks before the Sunday conversation and looked at the documentation in silence for a long time. When he finally spoke, all he said was, "I'm sorry, Darius." That was the last conversation they had. But when Yvette called him after the filing, he told her plainly that she needed to handle what she had done. She called Darius twice in the weeks that followed. The first call came on a Tuesday evening. His phone lit up on the kitchen counter while he was reviewing updated schematics for the school renovation's final phase. He watched her name on the screen until it stopped. The second came on a Saturday morning. He was in the driveway, the same truck, and he felt the vibration in his pocket and kept working. She did not leave a voicemail either time. The community that had attended that gala, seen her on Brent Holloway's arm, and said nothing to Darius. They withdrew in the slow, bloodless way that communities withdraw when they have been complicit in something they'd rather not examine. The warmth cooled, the invitations thinned. Not dramatic, not announced, just gone. The school renovation closed on a Thursday. The contract officer walked the final inspection personally and signed off without a single punch list item flagged. He shook Darius's hand at the end of the walkthrough and held it an extra beat. "I told you, in the spring this follow-on was yours if this phase delivered," he said. "You did," Darius said. "It delivered." He pulled a signed copy of the follow-on agreement from his clipboard and handed it over. Callaway and Associates was now the largest it had ever been. 14 employees, 2 active contracts, a name that meant something in this city. Jerome's office was the same as always, tidy, a little cold from the air conditioning, the blinds half open. He had the final accounting summary printed and paper-clipped when Darius arrived. Jerome walked him through it. Every number, every line. Fees, settlement, restructuring costs, legal retainers, all of it accounted for, all of it absorbed. What remained on the other side of it was intact. The business, the house, the assets, the contracts. Jerome set the summary on the desk between them. "You're intact," he said. Darius picked up the paper, folded it once, cleanly, along the center, slid it into the inside pocket of his jacket. He stood and extended his hand. Jerome took it. 8 months. That's how long it took for the silence in the house to stop feeling like an absence and start feeling like space. Darius pulled the new truck into the Callaway and Associates lot at 6:48 in the morning. Dark blue, crew cab, clean. Nothing that announced itself, just solid, the way he liked things. He parked in the same spot he always parked in and stepped out into the cool air. His crew was already moving. "Marcus," he nodded at his lead installer, who was pulling cable reels from the supply truck. "Morning, boss." Marcus lifted his chin. "New rig looks good. Does the job." He moved through the lot the way he always did, unhurried, taking stock. He called each of them by name. Deshawn, sorting conduit near the side bay. Terrence on the phone, flagging him a quick wave. Young Malik, the newest hire, carefully labeling a supply box in the handwriting of a man trying to prove something. Darius paused beside him. "Label faces out," he said. so you can read it from across the room without pulling the box." Malik adjusted it without being told twice. "Yes, sir." 14 people, 14 names. He knew all of them, knew which ones had kids, knew which ones were working on their journeyman certification, knew who needed the extra Saturday hours and who needed to get home by 5. He had built this crew the same way he built everything else, one deliberate choice at a time. He went inside and poured his coffee. The letter about the contractor advisory board had come 3 weeks ago, forwarded through Patricia's office since she still handled some of his business correspondence, a formal invitation to be considered for a seat. The board advised the city on infrastructure contracting standards, procurement processes, safety codes, minority business certifications, serious work. The kind of seat that meant something. He had written back to confirm his interest. Jerome had called when he heard about it. "Advisory board," he said. "Look at you." "It's a consideration," Darius said. "Not a confirmation." "It'll be a confirmation." Darius had smiled into the phone. He didn't argue. Sunday dinners with Paulette had come back quietly, the way good things sometimes do, without announcement, just a return to what had always made sense. He didn't know exactly when they had stopped during the years with Yvette. He only knew that at some point, Sunday evenings had become something to be managed rather than enjoyed, filled with plans that weren't his, or obligations that felt like performances. Somewhere in the weight of all of that, the dinners had simply faded. Now they were back. Pot roast. Old gospel on the kitchen radio. Paulette talking about her neighbor's garden and the church fundraiser, and a documentary she'd watched twice. Darius eating without checking his phone. Last month, he and Jerome had gone to the game. Falcons, home opener, bad first half, strong finish. They'd argued about the offensive line the entire drive back, the way they used to argue about everything when they were younger, and the world felt lighter. He had laughed until his chest hurt in the parking lot outside the stadium. And Jerome had laughed too, and for a stretch of about 40 minutes, it felt like no time had passed at all. He had laughed easily again. He hadn't noticed it returning, only recognized it afterward, the way you recognize warmth after a long cold. He didn't think about Yvette much. When he did, it was not with the hot, pressurized feeling he might have expected in those early weeks. It was cooler than that, more like looking at a structural diagram and identifying where the load had been distributed wrong. A clean read, no heat, just clarity. She had made her calculations. She had been wrong about almost all of them. Wrong about Brent, wrong about what the money could buy, wrong about Darius most of all. He didn't need her to understand that. He just needed to know it himself. He knew it. He drove past the block on a Wednesday afternoon, on his way back from a supplier. It was just a street. The Ferrari was gone, had been gone for months. The house Brent had been standing in front of had a different car in the driveway now. A sedan with a car seat visible in the back window. Regular life, moving through the space where a performance used to be. No trace of linen and aviators and borrowed arrogance. No trace of anything, really. Just asphalt, just a sidewalk, just the ordinary afternoon light falling the way it falls on streets, where nothing is happening. Darius drove through it without slowing down. That evening he sat at the kitchen table, the same chair, and spread the new schematics for the follow-on contract across the surface where the bank statements had once been. The house was quiet. His coffee was hot. The work was good, and it was his. He bent over the drawings and got to it. The best revenge isn't living well. It's building something that the person who betrayed you was never going to be allowed inside of anyway. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.